Yesterday, the story of Ethan Couch made headlines because he killed 4 people when he got into a vehicle and drove drunk with 3 times the blood alcohol level that's legal. And he's 16 years old, so he shouldn't have been drinking and driving anyway. Well, it turns out that he only got 10 years of probation instead of a 20-year prison sentence that prosecutors were looking for. And part of the defense was that he had something known as affluenza. He was so wealthy, and he never had to face any consequences as a result of that, so he was unable to connect his actions to consequences. So we should let him off easy. People were enraged about this, understandably so, and there was a psychologist who went up to the stand and testified in favor of Couch, and he was the one who used the word affluenza. So Anderson Cooper invited him on his program to kind of explain himself, and let's watch the first video where Anderson Cooper kind of came down harsh on him. Take a look.
This same judge sentenced a 14-year-old, not affluent African-American child, young man, who killed 1 person after punching that person and they fell down and hit their head. This judge sent that 14-year-old to the Texas Juvenile Justice Department for 10 years. And that kid is going to be in there till they're 19 years old. And if they violate their rehab program while they're in there, they may go to the adult justice system. So why is that okay for a 14-year-old poor kid, but for a 16-year-old well-off kid, they get to go have equine therapy? Does that seem fair?
There actually are black people who have money, Anderson. I don't know why you continue to make this a racial thing there.
Well, because I'm not saying that black people don't have money.
I treat all races.
That was a terrible answer. That was like the worst possible answer he could give.
Yeah, well, there is no good answer. So, I mean, what are you going to say? Like, oh, yeah, well, the black kid had it coming, or whatever, the poor kid. Does, you know, look, is race a factor from time to time in America when, you know, in our justice system?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know people want to deny it. They want to deny it, right? But we've shown 1.5 million cases on this show alone, right? And then they get mad at us for showing them the facts, right?
I think it has to do with race, and to a much larger extent, it has to do with socioeconomic status. If someone has the wealth and the power to appeal or to cause some trouble when it comes to the sentencing, well, the judge might think twice about coming down with a really harsh sentence. If it's someone with a lower or, you know, in not a great socioeconomic status, then the judge probably thinks, even if it's subconsciously, all right, the law should come down harder on this person.
It's just the type of lawyer you can afford.
Yeah, that's
a huge
it comes
factor.
down to that. Absolutely. I mean, it's the 2 tiers of the justice system. There are 2 justice systems in America, one for the rich and one for the 99%, one for the rest of us.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second, though, because regardless of who the lawyer is, the judge should have laughed at that defense. As a judge, as soon as a psychologist says, oh, he suffers from affluenza, guilty, guilty. Like, no, that's not.
Certain the jury would giggle, at least.
I know. It's kind of incredible that someone can successfully use that as a defense.
So my overall point is, I don't know anything about that judge. I would be surprised, even after this fact pattern, if she turned out to be some sort of vicious racist and like hates black people and loves white people and wants to get. I'd be really, really surprised, right? I think far more likely is she sees that kid and thinks there, but for the grace of God goes my kid, right? So I know a lot, I know kids like that. She sees the black kid and she doesn't think that. It's not necessarily coming from a malicious place,
it's
right?
not even intentional.
Yeah, I don't think she even recognizes it. But she, because of a lot of the things we have in society, about not just black kids, more importantly, poor kids. Like, they're dangerous. Well, you know how they are, right? And so, and so the rich kids aren't dangerous. Of course they're not dangerous. That was a mistake. That was an aberration. Whereas poor kids are dangerous, right? They come from bad areas where there's a lot of crime. So it's expected that kid would punch someone, of course. Well, if you're going to punch someone, you might. But wait a minute, I would far more expect that if I was driving drunk at 3 times the alcohol level that's allowed, that I would kill someone than if I just punched them as a 14-year-old. Mm-hmm. So you can't, there's no explanation that justifies the other kid getting 10 years.
It's not necessarily malicious, but you see this racism in our justice system again and again. I happen to have the numbers on drugs. With drugs, the black community is 13% of the population. They're also 13% of drug users, and they get arrested 38% of the time and 60% of the time convicted. More than white people, and it's because there's 60% of convictions, which is because they're black. I mean, it's a racist system, and you see it with the death penalty. The #1 determinant in whether a murderer gets the death penalty is race of the victim. because somewhere deep down, killing a black person not that big a deal, but you kill a white person, now you've harmed society.
I mean, anytime you see HLN or some other news network talking about some terrible story about a kid that's missing, how often do you hear stories about black kids that are missing?
Yeah.
You don't.
You never do, because that doesn't do so well with ratings, does it? There's a cute little white kid missing and everyone goes crazy over it.
Clearly it's because black kids are just way smarter. And so if someone pulls up in a van with a lollipop, they're like, hell no.
Yeah, and look, I still think the most important thing by far is that they can afford these psychologists and lawyers and this team that comes in there and makes a big stink about it. Whereas when poor people come in, they got no help, and they're assumed, unfortunately, consciously or subconsciously assumed guilty the minute they step in. So that creates this two tiers that's driving the country crazy. I really think this case is a bit of a tipping point. I think people are really, really livid over this, race or no race, right?
I don't think anything in this country is a tipping point. Nothing ever changes, regardless of how extreme the story is. Newtown changed nothing. This story will change nothing. People will forget about it by next week. That's the reality of it. Yes.
I really sense, and it's not just poor people, it's not just black folks, minorities, whatever. I sense the middle class. I've seen, and you know, I could be wrong, but my sense of what I saw online today was there was this palpable anger from the middle class. Like, why do they get away with everything and we bear the brunt of everything? Well, and Anna, there's at least a chance when the middle class is angry.
Not really. The
Okay.
middle class.
I think it's incredibly slow, but I think there are subtle changes. I don't know if this is a tipping point, but I think there are subtle changes.
Really? Like
It's another
what?
brick in the wall.
Yeah,
maybe.
like Syria. The first time you've ever seen our war machine and our media war machine rev up, and then it was stopped by the people. And I've never seen that. I mean, that I can think of. And you know, Hank Paulson having to step down as possible Fed chair, and because of anger from people. I think people are becoming more informed. It's very slow. I'm not acting like it's overnight, but I think it is these subtle changes.
Larry Summers,
I
right?
know you
Sorry,
guys.
Summers.
That's okay.
I know you guys probably can't see me. We don't have that many cameras, but just I just want to go back to the connection between society and then the economic factors and race. It's all connected. It's the reason why there's a certain everything you guys have said, how the judge relates to the kid, how the economic and educational factor you come from relates whether or not there's more black people getting access to more education, therefore better jobs, therefore better lives, and therefore being seen more, and therefore having a certain amount of visual that a judge may see a black person as a person and not just some kid who somehow was born and likes to cause trouble. All those things happen because you keep certain sections of people in their box. Therefore, they're never out. Therefore, they never get in the jobs. Therefore, they never make more money. Therefore, black and Latinos are in general, because of the system, kept in a lower socioeconomic status, so they can still disconnect and say, you know, there's some black people that are rich out there, and then it just writes everything else off. And then after it all happens, you can put people in jail, and then general society won't give a shit because they're still going, I don't connect that black kid either. You know, I saw on video the other day, these black kids are punching people doing the knockout game. Those are savages, and it keeps feeding the same system. Therefore, when they do it, no one gives a shit. Which is why, Cenk, you said if the middle class starts caring, somebody's gonna give a shit, because black folks have been caring this whole time, since way back in the day, but no one cares then either, because they're just black people. They just like to complain because they don't pull themselves up. All these things that come into the narrative of what black people are told by people that aren't black, and then it's written off to the rest of the people because the rest of the people have more power. When someone has any kind of power, they can tell you who you are and what you can do and keep you there. People are afraid to leave these circles because when you leave them, I'm talking minorities, you get beat the fuck back down into them. And again, I'm talking in general terms. Of course there's some rich black folks, of course there's rich Latinos, but they're trying to keep that where it stands so they can continue to do stuff like this. It's the most frustrating thing you can that we experience in this country.
We have one other video that
What
I think
he
is
said.
important. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go to it.
Before we go to the video, one quick thing about what JR said. There's an ultimate irony here. So the black kid gets 10 years, the white kid gets nothing, right? And then when you say, well, that doesn't seem right, they say, oh, there they go again, blacks complaining. But wait, I wouldn't have to complain if there wasn't a giant injustice. And what do you want me to do? Yes, sir? Like, that's, you know? And so they use the fact that they committed the injustice against you by saying, well, then you're complaining about it. So anyway, sorry, second.
All right, so let's hear from psychologist Dick Miller. Again, this is toward the end of the interview. And again, he doesn't have very good answers for Anderson Cooper.
You don't believe that there's a separate system, that this is a prime example that there's a separate system of justice if you have money?
I don't agree with you on that, of course. I do believe that just like you and I talked yesterday, if you have a lot of money, you get people with more skills. You get a better singer. We have you tonight. I'm sure that you make more than the local guy here. That's just the way the world works. And there's some good things about that, some not so good things.
Except that that's not what the Constitution says. Equal justice, equal protection before the law.
I thought justice was supposed to be blind, but
That
apparently
too.
she's supposed to take a peek. Like, wait, say,
How much
that's
money you
really
got?
rich.
You have
Yeah.
skills. You have skills.
Are
Therefore,
we
you're
allowed to
different.
use this defense as a country? Because we're a richer country and we have more rich people, so can we be like, bombing Iraq, WMD, Affluenza? We didn't know. We didn't know.
We don't even attempt to have a defense. Like, we don't even care.
But that's actually somewhat true, right?
That is
Because
what
they're
we do.
like, because we don't know the consequences of our actions because there never is any consequences, right? And then one time when there was a consequence, and if you say it's a consequence, people lose their mind, was 9/11, right? And then what do? Blind rage, like how dare you? How dare you? And I was enraged too, but it was such a blind rage that we wound up hitting the wrong guys. But that's okay because we have affluenza.
So we're the drunk driver, and when we
yeah.
run people over, we're like, how dare you get in front of the truck?
Yeah.
Why
Well,
did you jump in front of my truck?
Yeah, Bush being the drunk driver for 8 years is a very good analogy.